And good morning again. Welcome to Face the Nation. Senator Sessions is in the studio with us this morning. Senator Chuck Schumer is back home in New York. And Senator Schumer, I want to start with you because the president and the leadership in both houses has now agreed to a funding bill to keep the government running until October, but it includes $38 billion in cuts to federal programs. The problem is we really don't know where these cuts come. Tell us what some of them are.
Well, let me say the compromise, I think, is a fair compromise. Both sides gained, and I think it'll get broad bipartisan support. The turning point in this was when the hard right, which wanted to focus the cuts
Senator Schumer, before we get to that, tell me what some of the cuts are.
Well, the cuts are across the board. Everybody gives some pain. And we don't have the specific details yet. They're going to be published on Monday, and I'm not going to get into any of the specific details until then. But I can tell you this, that about half of the new cuts will go not just from what's called the domestic discretionary, but other areas, defense, agriculture, and things like that. And that's what allowed us to get up to that number. That was the turning point. The Tea Party folks wanted them all to come from the domestic discretionary, and it's much broader than that. More than half of the new cuts are from the so-called chimps, which don't cut the seed corn, the things like teachers and Head Start and cancer research and helping kids go to college, which we thought would have been a huge mistake because those would have hurt our economy and hurt the middle class. Our goal, cut the waste, but don't cut the seed corn, which keeps the economy growing, because the American people have said to us two things. They said, yes, cut, but make sure you grow jobs and grow that economy, and you had to do both.
Well, I mean, do members of the Senate and the House know what these cuts are? Because you say you can't tell us what they are?
Well, no, there are broad outlines. This much is coming from defense. This much is coming from agriculture. This much is coming from, let's say, HHS. But as for the specifics, those are going to be published on Monday, and we've agreed not to say anything before then.
Okay. Well, all of this, of course, is just prelude to the big battle coming down the road here, because if Congress does not agree to raise the debt ceiling, and that's going to have to be done in the next month or so, then the government will have to start defaulting on its debts. And if anyone out there thinks that what has just happened here in Washington didn't send shivers down the spines of economists and people who follow this sort of thing, just wait until you see the impact on the economy if the United States has to start defaulting on its Treasury bills. But the president has said he wants a clean bill. He wants an up or down vote on this to raise the debt ceiling. And last night, Speaker Boehner made it pretty plain that is not going to happen. Let's listen to what he said.
And the president says, I want you to send me a clean bill. Well, guess what, Mr. President? Not a chance you're going to get a clean bill. And I can just tell you this, there will not be an increase in the debt limit without something really, really big attached to it.
Well, Senator Sessions, what does that mean without something really, really big attached to it?
We've got to talk about the systemic problem that we have. We limited how much debt by congressional action that the country could assume. We've reached that limit far sooner than we thought because the spending is surging out of control. And so the question now is, should we raise it? And the American people are saying, children, you've misbehaved, you spent too much of our money. And I think through their elected representatives, they will insist that we make some changes in how we operate the budget. You could have a 2-year budget, for example, instead of 1. I think that would help. We can put statutory caps on spending. We can have a balanced budget constitutional amendment that failed by 1 vote about a decade ago. So I think there are a number of serious things of that nature that we must confront, and the president just can't waltz in and say, we're going to have a debt crisis if you don't raise the debt limit, Congress, and we're not going to have any changes, and I'm not going to support any changes. He's going to have to meet Congress halfway, really the American people halfway.
Senator Schumer, one of the White House advisors, David Plouffe, said this morning suggested anyway that the White House may agree to some conditions before raising the debt ceiling. What would be acceptable?
Well, I think David Plouffe said that the president would outline a proposal to get our long-term debt down this week, and that's a good thing. Because, you know, Speaker Boehner had to keep these negotiations going till the last minute to show the Tea Party people he was doing everything he could. You cannot do that with the debt ceiling. That is playing with fire. Because if the markets believe we are not going to pay our debts, it could be a formula for recession or worse. So this is playing with fire, and I would urge both sides to take the threat of not renewing the debt ceiling off the table. Having said that, the president is going to come forward early and outline a plan, as David Plouffe said. And it will be, that's a good idea because it doesn't bring things down to the wire on the debt ceiling, but it also will show the great contrast with Paul Ryan's plan. And while I don't know the details, there are, knowing what the president thinks, some specifics that are likely to be there, or some generals, rather, that are likely to be there. It'll be broader. The Ryan budget focuses on the middle class. You need to share sacrifice. And we believe that, for instance, defense cuts should be greater than Ryan proposed. There's waste there like everywhere else. And even more importantly, there have to be revenues. If you're going to reduce the deficit, how do you allow the oil companies to get huge subsidies, which was based on a time when oil was $17 a barrel, not $100? How do you give tax breaks for multimillionaires and companies that send jobs overseas and yet decimate middle-class programs? So it's got to be fair. It's got to be fair and across the board.
But you say it's got to include revenues, so you're talking about raising taxes.
Well, there are revenues in terms of oil company liabilities. There are revenues in terms of tax breaks for corporations that go overseas. But I think many of us feel that tax breaks for millionaires is part of that shared sacrifice. Absolutely.
Well, okay. Well, I guess I want to get a response from
one other,
Senator Sessions.
one other point.
Well, you shared a lot, Chuck, but this budget that the president has already submitted a few weeks ago is the most irresponsible budget ever submitted to the American people. We're in a financial crisis. It did nothing to change the trajectory we are on, but actually increased it. He has education spending increased 10%, energy 9.5%, State Department 10.5%, his rail deal 62% increase in transportation funding. We don't have the money. We're spending money we do not have. We have got to change. And what this Plouffe announcement today is we've got to examine it very carefully. The reason we've changed, the reason this dynamic has changed, the reason the president is dramatically suggesting he's altering the budget that he set a few weeks ago is because of the Tea Party. The people out there who are unhappy with the way this Congress has spent our country into virtual deficit oblivion and put us in a recession, and they're demanding a change. And I understand the big spenders don't like those people.
Well, let me just
I'd like them. I think they are saving the country.
Well, let me just ask you this. If we don't have the money, you're talking about we don't have the money, this plan that David Plouffe, that Senator Schumer just referred to, talks about lowering the tax rates for upper income Americans down to 25% and also lowering the corporate tax rate. Senator Schumer says we maybe have to raise taxes. Republicans seem to be talking about let's cut taxes some more.
The Ryan plan is a really comprehensive, historic plan that Erskine Bowles and Alan Simpson, the debt commission people, praised as straightforward, honest, and that any other plan submitted, they said, needs to deal in the same way that Ryan did. If they don't cut this spending, say where you're going to get the money, is what they basically said.
Let me
so
say
we're
this,
now
Bob.
waiting to see with our bated breath whether the Senate Democrats will propose anything. The House Republicans have stepped up. Will the Senate Democrats?
Let me say this.
Senator?
First, the only taxes we're saying is don't give the Bush tax breaks to the multimillionaires. No one else's taxes would go up. The pledge that the president made stays. But why shouldn't there be shared sacrifice? You're telling the other side wants to tell middle-class kids it's harder to go to college, wants to lay off teachers, stop research, which creates new jobs. We're saying there should be shared sacrifice. And I'll tell you one other place there'll be a difference, which is in Medicare. We both agree, I think there's agreement from both parties that we have to look at Medicare and Medicaid, these health entitlements. But instead of privatizing it, which is what Paul Ryan has proposed. When you privatize it, you're saying basically you give the insurance companies a lump sum of money and they go do what they want. What history has shown is rates continue to go up and costs continue to go up, but benefits go down. We're looking at keeping the benefits, but making the delivery systems more efficient. That was begun in the health care bill and will continue. And it's a much different proposal. It's not leaving it up to the insurance companies. So what I'm saying,
Bob,
Jeff, is this.
I understand.
We will both agree that we have a deficit problem and have to bring it down. Our belief is ours share sacrifice across the board, and yours is just aimed at middle-class people.
I deny that it's aimed only at middle-class people. But what is changing here is the president's budget did none of that. The president's 2,000 pages he sent to us just a few weeks ago proposed no changes in Medicare, no changes in Social Security or Medicaid, and actual increases in discretionary spending, increases in taxes, and still increasing the debt even more than we were already on. So we're going to look at this and we'll discuss it, Chuck and I will, and the members of Congress, and we'll wrestle with these difficult numbers. But I'm glad to see some sort of retreat and acknowledgement that their original proposal to do nothing is no longer on the table.
Let me just ask both of you, and let me just say this, and just a very short answer here because we're close to out of time. Do either of you seriously believe that they would not raise the debt limit when push finally comes to shove?
The president is going to have to meet with the Speaker in the House and make some concessions, and I think eventually we'll raise that debt limit. But if he thinks he can just do it without making any changes in the spending patterns we're on, it won't happen.
Senator Schumer.
Let me say this. Playing the same game they played on shutting the government down up till the last minute and using that as sort of leverage to get things they wanted. Unfortunately, we didn't go along with a lot of them. But doing that on the debt ceiling, a disaster. A formula of playing with fire that could actually have the credit markets stop taking U.S. debt and create a recession. This should be taken off the table now. It is highly irresponsible. It shows a lack of knowledge of how our government works. And major business leaders, Jamie Dimon has said he can't imagine either party would even think of doing that.
Bob, the president's going to have to reach out early if he wants to get an early solution. He cannot just do nothing.
All right. Well, gentlemen, I think we're going to be talking about this a lot more. Thanks.
He's just not doing what Jeff wants.